Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Wrap. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Marius Roodt. Let's first give a word from our sponsor before we get into the news, and this is from our sponsor, Hudaco Energy. Are you tired of skyrocketing electricity bills and the new phenomenon of load reduction? Meet Hudaco Energy, South Africa's trusted Tier 1 premium solar and backup power solution supplier. With over 100 years of trading experience and the backing of a publicly listed company, Hudaco Energy brings you the best quality international products to power your home or business reliably. From a 3 kilowatt single-phase systems to 250 kilowatt three-phase solutions, they've got options for every need. And here's the best part: they offer unbeatable financing and rent-to-own packages designed to lower the barriers, saving money, cutting electricity costs, and ensuring power stability regardless of what's happening at Eskom. Right now, they're thrilled to offer Daily Friend listeners an exclusive promotion. Book a free business or household audit, and they'll show you how to put money back in your pocket without hefty upfront costs. Reach out to them via email at sales@hudacoenergy.co.za or call them on 011 447 9864. Hudaco Energy, sustainable power and storage solutions provider. Right, so first news story today is about the Minister of Health, Motsoaledi, who is putting it all on the line, rhetorically speaking at least, when it comes to fighting for the implementation of the National Health Insurance. Speaking at the World Economic Forum's meeting on Wednesday, Motsoaledi said that the South African government is fighting, quote, a big war against those opposing national health insurance. He said, quote, it is a big war. There are already 3 court cases to stop it by big business, right-wing organizations, even unfortunately doctors' groups who are saying they don't want this universal coverage of yours. He said that universal healthcare coverage based on primary healthcare was South Africa's #1 priority under the Group of 20 presidency. He went on to say, quote, we are running 2 healthcare systems in my country. One is as good as you find anywhere in Europe. The second is not equipped in terms of human resources and everything else. The amount of money we're spending on healthcare, not many countries can reach that, but 51% of it goes to only 14% of the population, and the remaining 49% has to serve 86% of the population. I don't think any other country on the globe can be described in those terms. The only way to change this is to come with equity in healthcare and divide the money in an equitable manner. So there you have the case for NHI laid out by the health minister, Marius. There are a number of things which infuriate me about this. Firstly, the claim that this is some sort of war against evil forces. Some of the people opposing this are, of course, in his own government, and I think this just exposes the degree to which people like Motsoaledi don't take the government of national unity seriously whatsoever. There are even people in his own party who are not super keen on it. But also there's just, and this is a point you've made many times, Marius, the idea that you can just extract money from people and tell it how to be spent, as if that money spent on healthcare, it's just there to be directed as they wish. There's absolutely no care for the individual or for private property rights in this. But anyway, Marius, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what there's much more to say about this. It's the same arguments which seem that Motsoaledi doesn't seem to hear. And I mean, if you get down to it, then you could make the same argument that everybody's the money that you put into your retirement annuity for retiring one day, that's not actually your money and should go into a common pot. Or, if you really want to get silly, you can say, well, it's not fair that not everybody has got a private vehicle. So everybody should get, who can afford it should get taxed at the level of, having to buy a Toyota Corolla. So you got to pay an extra 3,000 Rand a month, and that goes into a common transport pot that everybody can use, or whatever the case is. It's, it gets all ridiculous. And as I've said before, nobody's saying that people who can't afford it shouldn't be able to get decent healthcare, but NHI is simply not the way to do it. And it's just mind-boggling that the way Motsoaledi and people like Nicholas Crisp, the DG in the health department, seem to think that people's after-tax money somehow belongs to the government. The money that people pay for medical aid is the money, it's their own, it's coming out of their disposable income. They don't have to spend on medical aid. They can spend it on whatever they want, but they've decided to use it for medical aid. And that money doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to the people who, it doesn't even belong to medical aids. It belongs to the people who've decided to put it in towards medical aids. So it's such a backwards way of thinking. And as you say, but I think it shows the contempt that Motsoaledi holds the GNU in. And he's obviously not even looking at other solutions. And it's just clear you can go and shouts and says, just people are racist, want to protect their privilege. But the National Treasury itself, which is part of the same government Motsoaledi is, has said that we can't afford it. It's simply unaffordable, NHI, as it stands now. And also, talking about universal health coverage, South Africa does have universal health coverage. Just unfortunately,
Exactly.
and so on are just not well equipped. And that's not the fault of people who pay their taxes diligently. It's the fault of the people who spend the taxes.
Exactly. This is the underlying line through all of this that just infuriates me. As you say, South Africa does provide universal healthcare. If you cannot afford it in South Africa, you can go to a government hospital, and they are supposed to look after you. We pay taxes for that. A large amount of money is spent by the government on this. It's a very significant budget item. Maybe we should be spending more. But unfortunately, a huge amount of that money is stolen or misused or just generally spent poorly. So now the solution is, okay, well, let's go to the one part of the healthcare system that is actually functioning and raid it for all of its resources so that we can feed more cronies, tenders. I mean, the Tembisa hospital alone, the one that Bobita Deokran was murdered in connection with, was hundreds and hundreds of millions of rands of just money wasted. This is nothing but a feeding frenzy dressed up as compassion. It will make no one's lives better. It's a terrible policy, and Motsoaledi is either lying about, whether this will improve people's lives, or he's deeply out of touch with the reality of South Africa's healthcare system.
But he's already been quite dishonest. There was an interview a week or two ago when he said something like 70% of whites on medical aid and only 50% of black South Africans, which might all be true. But if you look at the raw numbers, more black people have medical aid than white people, just because of obviously the demographics of South Africa. So, but he was obviously trying to frame it as this, a thing where just whites are trying to protect their privilege, blah, blah, blah. But if more black people will be affected if you decide to implement the NHI than white people. So it's all also comes down to a lot of this politics of resentment and so on as well.
Cynical racialization of the whole issue in order to drive South Africans apart so that we can be robbed. And
exactly.
It just absolutely infuriates me. Anyway, we will keep hammering on this, and we will keep encouraging civil society and politicians to do everything they can to resist the national health insurance, which will be an absolute disaster for this country's middle class in particular, but honestly for all South Africans, with the amount of damage that it will do to our country. Okay, let's go on to our next story, and this one actually has some connections, I guess, in theme to the previous one, and that is a academic at the International Inequalities Institute at the London School of Economics, Chana Tiga, says her research into history in South African schools ignores the legacy of apartheid, creating an illusion of racial harmony. What's really weird about this is that she doesn't claim that South Africans are not taught about apartheid, because South Africans are very obviously taught about apartheid, but said, quote, "But erasure and denial of the past are not the only ways to suppress historical claims and reproduce privilege. In fact, such overt strategies are often easy to identify and critique. In contrast, my research into racially diverse SA schools shows how the past can be recalled while its legacies are ignored." She said she claims that the way that people are taught about apartheid undermines political action aimed at undoing the legacies of the past. She said, "Much has changed since the days of apartheid, yet even as a democracy, South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world, and that inequality remains highly racialized, so much so that whites' average earnings are more than 3 times the total of black Africans. This is why so much is at stake in teaching about the history of oppression. In the short run, teachers can create an illusion of racial harmony as students learn not to talk about racism in the present, but in the long run, these lessons reproduce unequal power relations and block efforts at real equality." Basically, her argument, as far as I can work out, is almost to claim that we need to talk about apartheid as though it's still here, as though the sort of victories against it, as though all the changes to legislation or that all the changes to our society don't really exist because white people are still on average richer than black people, and there's far too much of this racial harmony going about when actually everyone should be at each other's throats because we're not all living in a utopian socialist society or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. Marius, what do you make of this?
I think there was a quote I read on somewhere, I can't remember now. I think it was from a Swedish academic, and he was criticizing other people in the academy. And he was about some weird woke thing somebody was saying, and said, "This is something so absurd, only a highly educated academic could believe it." And I think this is something quite similar. I mean, what does this person want? As you say, like, should we? I think teaching history in schools does actually, there is a propaganda element to teaching history in schools, I think, actually. I mean, when I started going to school in the 1980s, and I remember a lot of the history we were taught in, say, grade 2 or standard 1, standard 2, and so on. I remember it was, about how Afrikaners and English people first in conflict, but now we're working together, and it was all about, the old anthem for the country, not anthem, motto for the country was Ex Unitate Virus, which is unity is strength, which there's unity between English South Africans and Afrikaner South Africans. And, we were getting brainwashed to a degree. And I think there's nothing wrong with actually brainwashing people to a degree in schools to say, we all get on now, we got over this terrible thing called apartheid, and now white people and black people and Indians and colored South Africans, we all get on together. We're a new country, and I think that's actually more healthy than saying, whites are these awful, terrible things, and we must remember how horrible they were, and that's the only way we can move forward. It's all quite bizarre, and I don't really know what the point of this is. I mean, as you say, should we? It's actually it's quite mind-boggling, actually.
Yeah, no, exactly. The project, it should be about getting young people to look at South Africa as a country that should be built together by all South Africans, and not one where everyone is resentful of everyone else and wanting to avenge past slights, because down that way it leads nothing but stagnation. It leaves open gaps for cynical exploitation by politicians, as we talked about in our first story. It's just generally malevolent. Whenever this strategy she's proposing, essentially, to really dig in on these differences and these legacies, I think is actually, ironically, the exact way to perpetuate the legacies of apartheid, by keeping the country trapped in poverty and misrule for years to come. It's,
I agree,
unbelievably counterproductive, and it's frankly immoral.
And I think, schools and like teaching history, they do have a bit of a duty to make people think that there's such a thing as a common South Africanness that exists, and everybody in this country is a South African and belongs to this South Africanness, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't think it's, obviously, I think it's very important that things like apartheid are taught in schools. It's not something we can forget, and the history of South Africa and so on. But it's also not helpful to make people think that South Africa is just, it's the most important thing about South Africa is this great titanic clash between the races, and that's the only thing that's ever happened in this country, and it's the only thing that matters. And obviously, it's not. It's something that, racial tensions have been. It's a huge part of South Africa's history. We can't forget it, but it shouldn't be something that casts the shadow over South Africa's future as well.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I don't understand what the problem is with teaching people about apartheid in school. Like, simply the facts, which is what we currently do in a lot of ways in the system. The complaint is just teaching I don't know what.
And just teaching the facts, like if you just read the facts of apartheid, you'll know it was a terrible thing. You don't really have to be told, and by the way, this was horrible. We shouldn't do it again.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not to turn you into some sort of political activist for, identity politics. Anyway, clearly there are the forces in the universe, and particularly in our government, are trying to spike my blood pressure today, because I see that President Cyril Ramaphosa has apparently just signed the expropriation bill into law. But to avoid me frothing at the mouth, I think let's save that for tomorrow. For our last story today, very briefly, South Africa's relationship with a new Trump administration has been in the spotlight recently. It's expected that Trump is going to much more, shall we say, be active in his policy decisions around the world in foreign politics. And there's a lot of questions as to how South Africa is going to navigate the new Trump administration. President Ramaphosa said that he's not too worried about that. He says he thinks that it'll be pretty easy to get on with Trump, and that they'll be able to find common ground. He said, quote, "I'm sure we will find great solutions. President Trump is a great deal maker, and so am I, so we will be able to work together." I don't think it's going to be so easy, Marius.
Yeah, I mean, do you think we might see some real politics coming in with the government? We already saw Paul Mashatile saying yesterday, the day before, that South Africa is not really all that keen on a BRICS currency, and US dollar is still very important. And I think we might see reality meeting ideology here. Most of the time, reality beats ideology. So I think with any luck, we might see the current administration be a bit more sensible with its foreign policy. That's maybe wishful thinking, I think. And I mean, as we were saying before the show, maybe Ramaphosa is a good deal maker. He was, after all, the chief negotiator during the transition for the ANC. A lot of people say the ANC got a pretty good deal out of the transition. So maybe we shouldn't bash the president's negotiating skills just quite yet. Maybe we will see him beating even the great Donald Trump himself, who's the greatest negotiator that's ever existed. Maybe he'll even be able to out-negotiate Mr. Trump, or out-deal make Mr. Trump.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. Anyway, that is all the time we do have for today. So thank you very much for watching. If you like the show, please do like the video. Please subscribe to it. Please leave us good reviews on the podcast apps, and we will see you tomorrow. That's a wrap. The Daily Friend Show and The Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR. Or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.